You are listening to the Sports CDP Crash Course, your go-to podcast for all things sports related. We talk about how sports clubs and teams can sell more tickets and merchandise than ever before, and how they can negotiate sponsorship agreements of higher value. We also champion women's sports and discuss how data and innovation can help bring equality to the sports industry. We have interviewed industry leaders who have worked with the likes of the NFL, FC Barcelona, Women in Football UK, FIBA, the Davis Cup, just to name a few. So don't miss out. Listen to today's episode. Our next guest is the acting general secretary of the Swedish Esports Federation, a non-profit organization created to support and improve Swedish esports. Chris Jonasson has dedicated the last 10 years of their life to seeing esports recognized as a legit sport in Sweden, and as of May 28, 2023, this goal was achieved. Today, we talk to Chris about the Federation's journey to this point and their involvement in this monumental achievement. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. What a great introduction.
Love it, love it.
Almost getting me to start crying instantly, but I'm almost over it. But every time it comes up, and especially like every time someone mentions like how much it means for the kids, I go like I'm bawling. So.
I'm very glad to have you here. But before we begin, I like to start off our sessions with an icebreaker. Are you ready for that?
I am ready.
What's your favorite quote, expression, or motto, and why is it your favorite?
Oh, I've been thinking about this, and I've tried to narrow it down because there's three. Okay, so bear with me. The first one is, of course, if I can't play, it's not my revolution. And it's a wordplay on my favorite fake quote. It's a lady called Emma Goldman who responded to the fact that some dusty old man said that agitators shouldn't be dancing. And she made a larger quote about how if we can't have fun and we can't do things, like if we can't do the things that we want to do, there's no need for it. And someone was tasked with making a poster, so they made like the most famous quote ever: "If I can't dance, it's not my revolution." So if I can't play, and that's just like that's both gaming play or just play having fun. Like if we can't have fun, then what's the point? Another one that I really, really love is, and I don't know if I made this one up myself, but if you don't know that you're doing wrong, you can't do right. And that has been like one of the main points on my journey, both with like queer culture and organizational like culture. Just like if you don't know that you're doing right, if no one has a conversation with you that you're doing something wrong, then you can't do it right because you've been like indoctrinated with all of these norms and all of these thoughts. And then the third one is sharing is caring, or shared knowledge is the best knowledge. Like we need to help each other, educate each other. We need to like have fun and learn together, because that's how we evolve as a species and as organizations and as a sport.
And that's what we're going to do on this podcast. You're going to share with us like your experience, your knowledge, etc., etc. But I have to say, with the second quote, I'm actually reading a book called No Rules Rules by Reed Hastings, who's the CEO and co-founder of Netflix. And they're actually talking about feedback. And it's like, oh, just that whole concept of you need to know what you're doing right and you need to know what you're doing wrong. So you need to be receptive and you need to, those kinds of things. So yeah, I'm appreciating all three of your quotes, and thank you for going the extra mile.
Thank you for having me, and also like let's keep going.
Let's keep going. But why esports? Take us back to the moment when your love for esports began.
I think it began like it grew, right? I was always a gamer, and I've been like gaming. I've done board games, role-playing games, RPGs, a lot of like these different kinds of games. And I was somewhere along the way in the early 2000s, we started organizing LAN parties. And at the LAN parties, kids started to ask if they could compete in games. And which was like super strange for me at the time, but But okay, so it came like from the kids, and then when I saw like the passion, the enthusiasm, and how much joy it brought, it grew into my whole sense of what we call like meningsfull fritid, like a meaningful leisure activity time, and also like kids should be allowed to have fun on their own terms. So it started there, and I got involved in the Swedish Games hobby organization that works with youth culture and gaming, LARPing, everything from like paintball to computer sports, and computer games. And then I, somewhere around 2012, 2011, StarCraft 2 came back, and that was such a shift in the Western world in relations to esports. And for me, it was a huge awakening. With like, here's this thing that I love doing, and people are competing in it, and it's so fun, and it's so like amazing. So I think that my like I understand footballers or soccer players, depending on where you're from, is at the Globe in Stockholm when Thoresen wins, a Swedish StarCraft player, and he wins against like these Koreans who are so good at the game, and he wins, and I'm just like bawling, and I'm like, and on my way home there, I'm just like, I understand how the soccer, like how the football guys feel. Like, wow, that was such an epiphany for me. So I think that's like when somewhere where it started to growing into something more. And then my second favorite moment is at a LAN party in 2018. In 2018, my club had existed for a couple of years, and we had managed to build the best Overwatch team in Sweden. We didn't know it at the time, but it was the first LAN party event, so the first like physical event where you go to compete in front of a crowd in 2018, and slowly it starts starting to cry again. No, but like slowly it starts building. You can hear in the room people yelling Malmö, Malmö, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like, and then and so that's like a very dear moment for me, and also seeing like how working with these 7 teenagers and working with their parents and like creating the knowledge and the success story. And then we traveled through Sweden and won every competition in Sweden except one that was in conflict with 2 other competitions, but we went to Skellefteå and won the other 2 competitions instead. So that was an amazing year, and that was really really fun. And I think that's like somewhat like those early years in relation to my focus on like we need to respect and value the things that kids and teenagers enjoy to do, and the slow realization that this is a sport just like everything else. And I think that's how I got into it, and that's why I love it so much.
And that was the conversation we were having right before we started. We pressed record actually. I was sharing with Chris that my nephew is obsessed with Fortnite at the moment. And obviously, us being the older generation, like a different generation, we don't understand the obsession. I grew up being told go play outside, and that's always been sort of the I don't know, that's what I think the average parent, the average aunt or uncle is sort of encouraging kids to do. So when you see a child in front of like spending hours in front of a computer playing a game that you don't understand, it could be a big shock to the system. And you Chris were just giving me advice on how to approach that. How do we kind of encourage kids to play esports, but also how do you help the parent that's freaking out?
So I think we've gone through a change as a society. Like the first part of that change is like my favorite meme at the moment. I love so much just like this TikTok guy. He's shirtless with a beanie, and it's like, when you say that you used to drink water from the hose, like what does that mean? And then millennials and Gen Xers respond to that, and then people are watching the responses. And it's like one of my favorite things to do, because society changed so much that young people today don't really understand that like we were kicked out of the house when we were younger, like go out and play. And today it's gone from that to come watch TV with the family to now the kids are by their computers or phones or iPad. And it's still the same thing, like that it's been all the time. Like they're doing something, and they're doing a lot of it because they're young, and they get fixated on stuff, and they get happy like they're evolving. But the major thing, the difference that we have from now is the way society is structured. It's structured so much around digital social media and digital friendships and activities, and especially the COVID generation. They were locked up and forced to enact and start working with these digital tools. Like we changed a lot of in my friend group, we changed a lot of how we talk to each other and hang out after COVID, and we still meet up now and have board game nights and take after works and do like the things in a physical environment that we used to do before. But nowadays we're also having the added problem of people from around the world, because once we started doing things digitally during COVID, we also had like, so now if I'm calling like it's a board game night, are we going to have it physical or are we going to have it digital? Okay, digital. So Georgia, Spain, France, Austria, and America, do you want to join this event? Because we're going to have this event. And if it's in Malmö, then it's like, okay, well, you, and you from Sweden, do you want to come? So that's one thing. But when it comes to screen time, and when it comes to using the computer now or digital devices, we have to also think about that the kids are doing everything on there. So some kids are spending 3 hours doing their homework and then 1 hour watching a video, and then they spend 3 hours gaming. But for the parents, that's 6 hours by the computer. So we need to talk about screen time completely different than we're doing now. We need to talk about like how do you take breaks and when, and also the fact that like what you're doing with your screen time is actually makes a difference. If you're playing a game that improves your English, that helps with this, that helps with that. If you're just watching videos, then we might need to be concerned of what videos and what algorithms you've been caught up in. And if you're doing your homework, then like when do you need to take breaks and what do you need to do? The whole discussion about like ergonomics that we had used to have with 40-year-old ladies working in administration, we now need to have with our kids. And I think that's important. And I see that we as an esports organization are the ones that are best equipped to have that conversation with those kids and with those parents, because we understand what's going on. So for instance, one of the one of the conflicts that often comes up when parents contact us is like, well, they won't come to eat, or they're playing at night when they should go to bed. And there's a lot of like discussions about boundary setting and scheduling. And I always ask the parents like, well, what is your child doing? Well, they're playing some game. Okay, well, the first thing then is like, what game are the kids playing? Sit down, ask if you can sit down with the kid, like learn about the game, or read up on the game yourself, and like find the identifiers. Is this an esports game, or is this like watching a movie? Uh, are they playing with other people? So esports games are games you play with other people. You play them during a specific time with a specific objective, and there's often ranking involved, which means that Lorraine, it's time to eat, you need to come now is equivalent to running out on the football field, grabbing the kid and taking them, like, with the difference that it's always like it's always affecting your ranks and your friends' ranks, or a lot of the times. So instead of doing that, you could look at just how you rephrase the discussion at home, be going from it's time to eat now to it's time to eat in half an hour, so don't start a new game. Instead of saying you have to turn off the PC at 10, say you're not allowed to start a new competitive game after 9 or 9:30, depending on which games it is. Because some esports games are 8-minute games and some esports games are 40 to 90 minutes. And of course, the kid is going to sit there sometime during a Counter-Strike game, and it's going to be overtime, and it's going to be delays, and they're missing the curfew times of like, you have to. But you don't snatch your kid from the football field just because it's overtime. But if you come in there and you can see that it's 18-19 in the score, and you can see that this game has been running for a long time, it's an overtime, then it's okay. But if you come in and you can see that the score is 0-1, you know that this was just started this game. And then if you set that that's the boundary, then I'm sorry, that's your ranking and it'll go, right? But to phrase that, but the first things first is like you need to understand what the kid is doing and which game is it, how does it work, and how can you also show enthusiasm. Like I had one kid, Edin, who was amazing, and his sister is a pro footballer. And when his parents realized that what he's doing by the computer is the same thing she's doing with the football, it changed. It was so, it's such a change. It was so amazing. And that started like the trend with that's he's one of the players from this team that became the best team in Sweden. And just how those parents worked around, how they all realized that this was a thing, and how they were worked around, like coming to the venue to pick up the kids afterwards and being like, how was it today, did you do this, did you do that, just showing that they're interested. I think that's how you build the rapport, and how it's also possible to have this be something positive in the family instead of just being a conflict zone. I don't know if I ranted way off your question or um
Not at all. Not at all. That was so fantastic. And I love the parallels that you draw between esports and sports, and sort of taking this sort of real life example and putting it in a context that we already understand, right? So I think that was absolutely, absolutely powerful. But before we talk more about esports and what should be done and what shouldn't be done, or kind of continue that conversation, I would love for us to go back to May the 28th of 2023. You hear that the other federations have voted to recognize esports as a legitimate sport in Sweden. What is going through your mind at this point?
I think what happened was somewhere it was stop shaking, don't cry, tweet, send a tweet, don't cry, stop shaking. And then so if you see the like the meme picture of this event, it's like it's been in all of the newspapers and stuff. You can see like how everyone, because it took so long, right? We worked really hard, and we've done it for like several years. And this year we got there, the the response from the Sports Confederacy was kind of wonky. We're going to talk about that later. But so we came there with like super enthusiasm, and we were like, this is going to go so well, and everything's going to be so good. And then we started talking to people, and like a lot of the small sports federations were like positive, and then we heard like some of the big ones just like, no, we're not supporting you, we're not going to let like, and that was like, oh wow. So then we started counting like, okay, so if we have these and we have these and like blah blah, and so it was really stressful. And then the event started, and you had like archery and school sports and cycling and motorsports like coming up and like speaking for us, parasports speaking for us, like one after the other. So I was already like crying for half an hour because people said so many beautiful things. And then so the Sports Confederacy works in a way where it's like it's always the Sports Confederacy board's line unless someone screams that we need to vote about it. So it's first what they call acclamation, and you can hear like yes. So all of those against say yes, yes. All of those against say yes, yes. I was like, is that like, is it the same? Wait, what's happening? What's happening? Because what happened right before the vote was that someone from the Gymnastics Federation went up and said like, can we have like 5 minutes pause so that we can talk to each other? And that never happens. So we were like already like, I ran because like Daniel from the School Sports Federation was like waving to me. So I ran, and I came like I smashed my feet because I was in the socks, and I ran on these like scary stairs, and he was like, they need to ask you something. And I was like, okay, what? So and then they were like, I don't even remember the question, but it was a question that I could be like, no, it's not going to be a problem. It's like this and this and this and this. And then everybody nods, and then they went back. So we got back to our seats, and it's really similar. Okay, so someone writes vote like votering, which is like we need to vote about this. And then we're sitting behind like the big sports and the sports that we like, and the board of the federation, like the confederacy, and like all of the people who are like kind of negative. And like all of those voting against the membership, raise your hands now. And they all raise their, like we're in the sea of hands. And then they take down, and then the rest of the room goes up like a forest, and I'm like, oh my god, like it's no. And then again they say like, and it's not, because it's always the until it's counted in the system, and then it's voting again, and everybody goes to the digital system. And I have a video that's amazing where Johanna from the Swedish Taekwondo Federation turns around and starts filming us right at the end of the voting, and you can hear, like, I finished the vote and you hear the club, and then you hear one person who's watching their iPad go woohoo, and then it pops up, and it takes like 4 seconds before everybody goes like, oh my god, and we're in, and all I could think about was like, I need to tweet this, but I was like shaking. And then after that, it was like, I don't know. I tried to like, I think what ran through my head was like, what? Oh, like, it's real. Like, all of the things we've been fighting for, all of the kids are going to be taken seriously. The struggles, the funding, the possibilities. So there were just so many things, and it was so wild. And I I can't really describe it, because it was like chaos. Like, during the day, I'd been walking around the Sports Confederacy meet, talking to like insurance companies, travel companies, and everyone else. And they've been like, oh yeah, great. We'd love to cooperate with you and help your kids, but you need to become a member first. So it was like it was such an amazing feeling, just because also like how the Swedish system works, like being a youth culture or being like a youth organization that way is like a third of the funding. It's none of the like exemptions. Like, we lost major competitions, like the world's largest Dota competition, because we were not a sport in Sweden. So we weren't automatically included in the sports visa exemptions for COVID. So all of those things, like so many of those things, are now automatically there, and it's such a huge lift for like helping these kids that want to do this seriously to do it seriously, and also to get other sports club who've been thinking about it to actually start doing it. Like, I get mails every week from sports clubs around Sweden who's like, oh yeah, we're looking into this, like, what do we do, what do we need to do, and how will it work, and it's so it was a lot, and it's still a lot. Like, I just came back from holiday, which was sorely needed, because I've been working like 24 hours a day almost, like trying to keep up with everything, and it's so many things happening, and in the meantime, we're trying to like organize the best national team, one of the best national teams in the world. We're going to Romania in 2 weeks, and like all of those things at the same time. So it's really it was amazing, and it still brings me to tears when I think about it.
And why did it take so long? Like, why was it such a struggle? What were the main objectives that the other federations had against esports federation or esports becoming a thing in Sweden?
We went through a struggle. Like, we formed the Swedish Esports Federation in 2016 with the goal of applying for 2017. So we applied for 2017, but then it was like the Sports Confederacy was thinking that they needed to reevaluate how they accepted new members, and how that would work. So all of us were put on hold almost. So we applied again, renewed our application for 2019. And 2019, it was discussions about values, about violence, and about the organization of esports. And we had some supports, parasports, school sports were the main ones. But that was like the problem. So, but we then pointed to the facts, right? Just as with the screen time discussion, like it's not about what you do with the screen time. It's not how long it is. It's what you do with it and how you take breaks. There are studies, like the largest study made on digital time with kids is an I think it's Edinburgh University, but it's 12,000 15-year-old Australian kids, and they're measuring in regards to PISA results, online gaming, and online activities. And you can clearly see that like the kids who are into online games or playing online games have a higher PISA results than the ones who use internet for other things. And it's also tied to how early you start using the internet and like again what you're using it for. And with violence, also like in the last years, there's been real research being done on that. But before that, it was like one of my favorite studies to show how absurd this was a study where they were made to play a game that was non-violent and a game that was violent. And the violent game was like Mario Kart. And then they asked people to season foods with Tabasco for someone who didn't like strong food. And the people who did play the violent games put more Tabasco in the food. So violent games are dangerous. So that was the level we were at before people started doing. But there's been studies way back. Like in America after Columbine, they started looking into it. They started looking into like mass shootings and the prevalence of violence in media, and what you could see already back then was like the media didn't make violent kids, but kids who were predisposed to violence might enjoy violent media, violent poetry, violent video games much more. They did a huge study where they looked at like litteraturgranskning. I don't know what that's called in English, but when you look at like different science papers and you compare them, and they came up with like kids were more violent for a bunch of other things, including like sharing bedrooms, being bullied, only having one TV at home. Like a lot of those factors came in way before video games. So again, like there's really no science that proves that part. And then people were also, yeah, but like it's still values, and we were like, yes, okay, but in Sweden, MMA is a sport. We have a knockout sports is sports in Sweden, but that's actively physically harming people. So we managed to get around that. I think like people stopped thinking about the violence as a factor in it, and then it was like the whole discourse about kids not moving enough, which is a huge thing in Sweden. We're talking about because Sweden is a highly digitalized society, and we've been like all the way back since like the 80s, 90s when they had the home PC program, and that's also like we are one of the best organizations to work with that because we can meet the kids who are playing games, especially like if people are playing video games, we can't help them, but if they're into esports, then we can motivate them to start the complementary training, to work out, to move, to look outside the window every 20 minutes, like all of these important things, eat right, sleep right, all of those things. So we also like managed to get around that, and people realized, more and more organizations realized that we were one of the ways to reach the kids that Swedish sports is losing. And then in the end, it ended up this year with organizational factors for the last 2 years. We didn't have clearly defined enough which specific esports games we were working with. And there were two organizations, because there was an other organization in Sweden that did like all the national teams and stuff. And in 2021, they also applied for national recognition. So one of the things that we did 2022 was we merged into one organization, because like if we're both looking into doing international stuff and we now both wants to become a member of the Sports Confederacy, let's be one organization. So we merged. That was great. So when we came this year, there was only like one little thing, which was like the major objective from the Sports Confederacy and the team from there who had been looking for it and advising the board, and that was whether or not we own the games. And we've always been talking about esports as a phenomenon, right? We didn't want to define very clearly like this game, this game, this game, and this game, but like esports as in general. And there was a problem with how loose that was. because in Sweden, the rules of becoming a sport is like it's physical activity, it's the organization owns and administers it. There's competitions in it, and those are the main pointers. And then it's like how big the organization is, and people were looking at, for instance, like Valve's blog about Counter-Strike updates, and they didn't see that we owned the game, and like, or that we could own the rules or the games, and we had to motivate that. So that was the major issue. Like, we own the competitive rules. Sometimes we might not even want to compete in what's the goal of the game, right? We can set up whatever game like rules we want, and like, even if Counter-Strike is mainly a 5 versus 5 game, there's also competitions 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2, and same with like League of Legends and Dota and Rocket League. So that was the main discussion, where they were like, well, what if someone changes something, like here, they've changed they pointed to a specific blog which had like things like, oh, we cut the hedge on this map. We fixed an arrow on this map where a Molotov burning on the other side of the wall will damage your player, and stuff like that. So and I think that's one of the things where esports struggles internationally. Like, one of the things where we say is like, organizing is the only way to reach a level, and like, you can see the smart game developers, they are listening to the community, and they're changing things based on the community. So it's a back and forth, and just like in other sports where they have VAR, for instance, now like with the Swedish national team's amazing 1mm win against America. That's like, those are also systems that have patch notes, and also systems that someone else controls, and the same way, like Taekwondo had to change their rule sets because the developers of Taekwondo point gear changed how the point gear worked. So it's a complex, and it's gonna be a complex world for all sports. I just think that we're in that complex world a lot earlier than other sports are, where you have to be in control of, or be in communication with the owners of the mechanical or digital tools. Like when motorsports in Sweden, or car sports in Sweden, all of a sudden was like, no, you can no longer have lead in your gasoline. Or when the shooters, like pistols, or organization, I don't know what it's called in English, but when they were like, you can't have lead ammunition anymore. Like, those are changes that you can't control. Or when the orientation, like the people running in the forests, when they have restrictions on like how they can build maps, and all of those things are external factors affecting their sports, and that's the same for us. So and now, like, we're working around it, and we're looking at it, but the main point for me is like, let's organize the kids, let's value their activities, and let's make sure that we can host, administer positive esports, and do it in a way where serious organizations and serious groups are working around, instead of just leaving it as a wild west that we don't know anything about. Because one of the like major hurdles or situations that we're in now is like a lot more regulation and a lot more stuff, but it's also going to build a more secure system. Like, you don't have to, if you want to do esports, you don't have to be a part of the Swedish Esports Federation. But if you want to have the tax deductions, if you want to have the better insurances, if you want to be able to compete in these national competitions for become like Swedish champions and stuff in the future, then you're gonna have to organize here. And we're looking at, and we're talking to the already established pro teams to see like, how can we work together, and what can we do, because the Swedish system is based on membership in the Sports Confederacy, and the recognition of sports is also tied to that. So we're finally in the system, and now we can start working within the system and regulate and support in a much better way.
And you touched a little bit on this, But what does this decision to recognize esports as a sport mean now for you, for the players, for their clubs, the federation, and any other stakeholders involved?
So I think one of the main thing is that we're no longer, like, the Swedish Sports Federation is no longer fully funded by sponsorship money. Like, starting next year, we will get a small amount of money that's not sponsorship money. So for us, like for the federation, it's a slow process. It'll take years, but for our local clubs, there's like instant better insurances. There are some tax deductions and things for judges and coaches and like things connected to the sport. There are much more funding. So going, like, my local club went from being a youth culture club to now being recognized as a sports club, and that tripled the amount of funding that you get per activity. And I think that that's like one of the major things. It's a material sport. It's a very expensive sport, and if we're going to have the possibility to work with quality diversity to reach kids in suburbs and like organize everyone besides like the kids who are rich enough to have computers on their own, we need that funding, and we need to have municipal help with venues and all of those things that we're looking into now. So I think that like the instant reward is just like the recognition and being a part of this system. Like, now the people that are advising our clubs are the same people that are also advising other sports. Or when our local clubs are having issues with, like, how do we educate these leaders, these young leaders, and how do we educate them to being good organizers, or how do we educate these young coaches to become better coaches? They are all already connected to the same system where all of the other coaches are educated, so they can talk to the same people, and they will be invited to the same courses. They will be like, they're in a system and in an organization that is built around creating good, sustainable sports environments.
To kind of tie it back to what we started with earlier, there's so many misconceptions and misgivings about esports, and obviously just listening to you, like I could listen to you all day because you just it all makes sense when you talk, right? But not everyone has a Chris to talk to. So is the federation planning on doing anything to educate the Swedish public or indeed other federations on how esports is useful and why it's important, especially like you said, in terms of context, in today's world, in today's context, esports is very important. So are you planning on doing anything in that area?
Yes, it feels like it's all we do. It's so much of my work now is talking to clubs who want to do this, talking to federations. Not so much like talking to the federations yet. We've done that work so much, and the federations that are already on board are somewhat on board and are looking to like what to do. One of the things that we're doing with virtual sports is talking. I don't know this for sure, but I somewhat think that discussion started in Sweden, because in Sweden we had to define what we're doing in relations to what others are doing. Because in Sweden, one of the things is you have to administer and a sport that no one else does. No member in the sports confederation can do this, so there can't be two soccer organizations in Sweden. So one of the things that we did was, like, we drew a line between virtual sports, or we called it e-idrott, and esports. And then all of a sudden, a year ago or half a year ago, the Olympic Committee started talking in the same way, like virtual sports. So for like the Archery Association, for instance, we can help them if they want to get help to evaluate like what would be a reasonable game to do e-archery in. The e-cycling has already managed. They have a game up that's amazing. That's also connected to actually physically cycling on a cycle. Of course, like eFootball and FIFA. FIFA was, of course, like owned by the Football Association. There's going to be no more FIFA games because that contract has run out. But like for eFootball, it's the Football Association that runs eFootball. But we can be there as technical guidance, and we can be there to support and help and realize. But at the moment, it's a lot of like, oh yeah, you want to do eFootball? Well, then you should talk to the Football Association. If you want to do esports and Fortnite and Dota and like Rocket League, Counter Strike, you should come to us and talk. So one of the things that we're doing there is like we're helping the local clubs to talk and get the knowledge of what they need to do. But we're also like planning on doing more of the things that we've done. Like last year, we went to IKEA on the IKEA Gaming Day, and we were there talking and meeting parents and doing stuff. And we're going to do more of that. Uh, and we're going to do. We have like one of our main sponsors is a whole Quality Globe in Stockholm. That's part of Strawberry, like the huge Nordic hotel chain, and we're like working with them to they've started doing like gaming rooms on the hotels, and like we're doing a lot to educate and work and having these conversations with parents, with teachers, with civil servants in general, and we're planning on doing a lot more of that. We're organizing Nordic Women's Counter-Strike Championship in December, and that's going to be a place where we also do this. So we're doing it in Sweden. We're doing it with the kids. We're doing it with the parents. We're doing it with all of the people who work with kids and civil servants and sports people. But we're also doing this. Like I'm going to be 12 days in Romania for the World Cup, and we're sending a huge delegation to the World Cup. And we're going to be there talking about like how you need to work with the kids, how you need to organize transparency and democracy and good governance, and bringing those Swedish and Nordic values into the World Esports or the International Esports Federation, as it's called, but the World Championship. And we're doing the same thing in Paris with the European Federation. We're going to go to Iceland together with all of the Nordic federations to start a Nordic association somewhat. And so it's a lot. Like now I think like my president Sami Kaidi said it really well in Katowice in the first European Games in esports ever, when we had a meeting there, and we were like, we have reached our first goal now. Now, like we're a sport in Sweden. Now we need to take responsibility internationally and nationally. So a very long way to say yes, but the answer to your question is yes. Like our social media and our homepage is getting a rework, a much needed rework. So please don't judge us on what's up there now. But like our social medias, our Twitter or X is being used a lot, and also like Facebook. And we're also looking at like more social media and in the future. But like yeah, so there's a lot of things, and always contact us. Like you email us through the contact form or through our info address, and we'll see what we can do to help, right? Because like sometimes it's like with your nephew, like I don't have a club there, but I know this venue, and this venue is reasonable and you can go there. So um I
Um,
think that's it. That the best thing. Like we're doing as much as we can to help educate and lift the organization, right? And lift the kids. The kids are important.
Fantastic. Now, if anyone would like to get started with esports and not just in the Swedish context, how can they get started, Chris?
I would say this is a broad one. It depends on what you want to do, right? If you want to organize NGO, organize the sports clubs, like it depends. Like in Sweden, it's very simple. Like because we have this weird civil society and sports system that a lot of other countries don't have. So one of the things that I always do when someone from another country talks to me is like, can you explain how your system works? Because that's step number one is like look into your system. How does it work in your country? And if you want to organize, and then you can decide if you want to organize as an NGO or a sports club, or as a professional entity, and like what's the goal? What do you want to do? In Sweden, I would say like I think all of the clubs in Sweden are reasonable. So you have Alliance, you have NIP, you have Godsent, which are like the three big ones, and then there's a plethora of other smaller ones as well. And you could just like talk to them, ask for experience, and like, because it's a lot of like, one of the things that I see at least is we don't it's not a competition like that. It is at the highest of levels, but it's still also a lot of like friendships and good connections and people helping each other. And I think that's like, because we want to have good people to compete with, and the more of us that are in the system, creating professional players, or creating a basis for recruitment, the better it is for the ecosystem in general. So depending on what you want to do, like in several countries there are good officially recognized, like at least in some places by the state or the National Olympic Committee, and in other cases by the international organizations. And then you can see, like, go to the EEF homepage or the ISF homepage and like look in my country which organization is there, and then ask if you can get involved somehow, or ask them how the system works in your country. I think that is a great. If you're in the Nordics, I'll hook you up with someone from the Nordic context, definitely. If you're in the UK or the Commonwealth, you have British Esports, of course, who's a major player. And also, like, so it's about like what you want to do. If you want to get into esports as a player, try to find a local club, or try to find people to start a local club with. And it doesn't have to be rocket scientists, rocket science. It doesn't have to be amazing at the start, because we are a digital sport. But you need to start organizing and start doing things, and then when you reach that level where you want to evolve, you need to start looking into how does the system work. So my local club, Malmö Esports, started as a club that did like one or two LAN parties a year, and then we did digital events for our members. And then we started looking at like, how does the system in Malmö work? How can we get more funding? How can we get a venue? And how can we like move on and evolve? And I think that's a good way of doing it. It's just decide if you want to be a local entity or a national entity, or like Female Legends is one of the national entities in Sweden that have been working with women and non-binary, um, and they are doing like this major national online events and boot camps and trainings and stuff. And you have Swedish Online League, which is just recognized by Riot, who are now like officially doing Riot's competitions in Sweden. You have Svenska Raketligan, who are doing like the Rocket League competitions in Sweden. That's also like a national organization doing competitions, right? So if like it's all about like identifying the ecosystem and see where you want to go, because there's so many different places to go, and some countries are less a lot less organized than we are in the Nordics. But I think if you want to do the work and you want to have fun, then it's possible. Just learn how the system works and learn, and then like create an organization, get an OID number, start talking to the other European organizations, start making exchanges, and start like going to competitions, signing up for competitions.
Fantastic, fantastic. And you spoke about people emailing you, people sending you or checking out your website. We will have all the details in the description box. We'll also have Chris's LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with them, you can connect with them there. But Chris, thank you so very much for coming to the podcast and talking to us about esports.
Thank you for having me. I think it's amazing to be in a place where we're like talking about it from this perspective, and in this like on a podcast like this. I'm super stoked, and just don't be afraid. And to all like parents who are listening in, like, talk to your kids. Your kids are your best teachers. You will never be able to limit them or work, because they will know the workarounds. Just ask any parent with a 5-year-old and an iPad. The kids will work around. So talk to your kids and understand what they're doing, and then look into how can you help them do that in a better way and in a more helpful way and in a better organized way. Like, the organization is the key, I think.
If your goal is to get more supporters, superior sales, and real revenue, then visit our website at datatalks.sc and fill out our demo form to experience firsthand how we can help you. Data Talks, more supporters, superior sales, real revenue.